Hello and welcome to another episode of Thick Slices and Deep Cuts. Today's show, I will be covering probably the most successful metal band of the last 30 years. That is straight out of Texas. We're talking about PANTERA. So PANTERA, I've gone over the classic metal, which, the pillars of metal, in my opinion, it starts with Sabbath, it continues with Priest, you've got Maiden, and then I would say Metallica and Slayer round out like the thrash and extreme forms of music. And those are the 5 pillars of classic metal. But then in a more modern time, basically, let's say 1990 to the present, PANTERA came along and has probably influenced more bands in the last 30 years. I mean, they reinvented the style of like thrash, they brought in groove, and then they just spawned all these bands that went off and did their own, created all these different scenes. So PANTERA are probably, if there was a 6th pillar, it would be them. I don't include them just because they're a little more modern. But there's a caveat to that. They're not necessarily modern. They had albums out in the 80s that a lot of people don't know about. And frankly, I didn't really even know about this until maybe the last 10 years. I had no idea that the album that they put out in 1990 was in fact not their first album. In doing this review, I really had a fun time doing this review because they have 9 albums total. And while I know 5 of them well, there were 4 that I didn't know anything about. So I spent this review studying the 4 albums that they did in the 80s. Very interesting. Very interesting. So I'll cover that as well. I don't own any physical copies of the 4 albums they did in the 80s. I have everything else. So this is a band that came out to the public in 1990 on a major label, and they did 5 albums between 90 and 2000. And that sound is what they're known for. But they definitely had a history before that didn't have this sound, and I will get into that here shortly. In fact, let's just get into it now. So 9 albums. The top 5, by the way, all excellent. Tough to rank the top 5. I mean, I kind of knew my one. I knew my top 2, but I didn't know which one was going to be 1 and which one was going to be 2. I knew my 3 and 4, but I didn't know which one was going to be 3 or 4. And there's nothing wrong with my number 5 either. Let's just get right into it. Okay, so coming in at number 9. And I don't own a physical copy, so I'll put the picture up. But at number 9, I'm going with their debut all the way back in 1983. It's called Metal Magic. And that was the name of the record, their own record label that they had. So you've got Dimebag on guitars, you've got Vinny on drums, you've got Rex on bass. But at this stage of their career, on their first album, they have a different vocalist. And he's with them for a while in the 80s. His name is Terry Glaze. And these albums are produced in the 80s by their father, Jerry Abbott, who apparently had a history of being like a country music songwriter, musician, but he's producing them, so they're doing this, it's all do-it-yourself at this point. They got their own label, they've got their own studio, they're producing themselves. I will just say this about Metal Magic. Dimebag was like 16, Vinny was 18. These guys were like teenagers when they did this album. The album cover is hilarious, but it still has a charm to it, and the opening notes of the entire album, it just sounds like you're about ready to hear Detroit Rock City by Kiss. And that's another thing, these early albums, they're fun. I mean, they're nothing, if you're expecting thrash, there's no thrash here. This is just good, like Kiss, Van Halen, some Def Leppard, a little bit of Judas Priest. If they get heavy, it's going to be more of that vein. But just a fun album. Ride My Rocket, I mean, you're talking teenagers here just kind of emulating their favorite bands, and that's what you get here. What else? The title track is okay. They haven't even found I don't even think they found their 80s sound yet. So in the 80s, they were nicknamed Glamterra. I don't even think they found their glam yet on the first album. Their first album is just pretty much a Kiss Van Halen type album. But it's fun, it's very naive, and it's pretty cool. And it's just interesting to see the history of this band that you thought had one sound like what we're hearing now, but they started in a completely different vein on their very first album. So coming in at number 9, going back to 83, I've got their debut, Metal Magic. And so coming in at number 8, and my 8 and 7 were pretty much even. But number 8, I'm going to go with their third album from '85. It's called I Am the Night. Another goofy album cover. It's their third album in this, it's their third and final album with the vocalist Terry Glaze. But you still got Dimebag and Vinny, and you've got Rex. And at this point, they're definitely in '85. There definitely is a glam sound here. But the thing that makes these guys different from the other bands like that is that this band, you've got Dimebag and Vinny, and they're pretty aggressive on their guitar riff writing. And so you got some pretty aggressive riffing going on, and it's pushing glam. You don't hear hair metal get quite this heavy. I would say the closest you might get is, what is it, Out of the Cellar by Rat. I mean, this is definitely metal. Like, a lot of times when people label something hair metal, I'm like, it's labeled hair metal, but it's not metal, it's just glam rock. Well, this is literally hair metal. I mean, they have the look. The singer sounds total hair metal glam rock, but the riffing is just really heavy most of the time. They'll still throw in like a sappy ballad here and there. Like on this one, the final track, Forever Tonight, the singer even tries to sing like Paul Stanley. It sounds like a total Kiss ballad type song. Hot Heavy comes out with aggression. There's a song called Come On Eyes, which is somewhere in between that. So nobody's digging the direction of Pantera. If you're a regular Pantera fan, I'm not saying anybody's digging this direction, but for what it is, it's actually really good. And the productions here still being produced by their dad. They're not bad. Like I said, they're heavy here, and you can just tell Dime's getting better and better. And this is their third album now, and their second in a similar style here. And I think at this point, they've pretty much done everything they can in this early to mid '80s style. And at this point too, Dime's getting better, and there's there's a decent amount of thrash metal that's coming out by '85. Certainly, after this album is out and before the next one's released, there's a lot going on with regard to, say, thrash metal or heavier metal. So there you go. Coming in at number 8, I'm going with their third album from '85, I Am the Night, their final one with their original vocalist, Terry Glaze. So coming in at number 7, it inches out I Am the Night barely, but it's their second album from '84. It's called Projects in the Jungle. I don't know, I dig this album, and that Terry Glaze sounds just like Joe Elliott on like High and Dry or Pyromania, or even On Through the Night. So there's a total early Def Leppard sound on here, mixed with Dime's even got a solo on here, like a solo spot like Eddie Van Halen had Eruption. Well, there's a spot on here for Dime, so you've got this early Def Leppard High and Dry sound. You've got some Van Halen coming in, and it gets a little nearly thrashy even for '84, like a really heavy Judas Priest at times. So this is my favorite listen of the Terry Glaze albums, of those early albums, and it's a little. I think I Am the Night is their glammiest sounding album. This one's '84, so it's not really super glammy. It's just like a product of its time. Much like Dokken's Tooth and Nail, we consider Dokken a hair metal band, but I think in '84 Tooth and Nail was just a good metal album, and I think that's what this is. It's a little lower production, a little more obscure, but I'm digging this album. Out for Blood, All Over Tonight, In Over My Head has a little bit of keyboards, so they're trying to do all the styles of the time. And again, Dime is. He's a teenager throughout all of these albums with Terry Glaze. And they pumped out 3 in 3 years. So he's 16, 17, 18 when they're doing all of this. But he sounds excellent on here. And this is just the album I just enjoy the most from beginning to end. It's not, whereas I Am the Night is slightly too glammy and a little cringeworthy, this one's really not offending me in that way, even though it's a little bit on the hair metal end of things. But I do think this is my favorite Terry Glaze vocal performance too. And this is definitely a huge step up from the first album. The first album was pretty naive. I'm not saying this isn't, but seems like a pretty decent product at this point. So there you go. That's at number 7, their second album from '84, Projects in the Jungle. And then so coming in at number 6, from '88, their 4th album, Power Metal. This is their first album with Phil Anselmo on vocals. And there's a 3-year gap. So this comes out in '88. Their first 3 were in '83, '84, '85 with Terry Glaze on vocals. Then they sack him. You know, I'm not sure what happened, but I think, not that he was a bad singer, but if you're going to change sound, and Terry Glaze is like, well, I'm a hair metal guy. Well, you have to get rid of him if you want to change. It's not that he's a bad singer, it's that you have to change style. And I think between '85 and '88, a lot happened. I mean, think about what happened in the scene of thrash just in '86 alone. Not to mention '87 when, you know, so much has happened. So they go out and get Phil Anselmo to be their vocalist. And you'd think, okay, well, here's the band. They're going to have that Pantera sound. Well, you know what? This album is the only album I've ever heard like this, where it's like, it's stuck between glam and thrash. How do you do that? I don't know. Only Pantera in the 80s, only Glamterra could do it. But they still have these ballads with keyboards. They have one ballad with a keyboard on there, but then they followed up with Over and Out, which is straight up thrash. And Phil can sing, but he sounds like Jeff Tate from Queensryche, which, by the way, is a highest of compliments to the fact that we forget that Phil can really sing. But it's him singing and kind of emulating like Jeff Tate or maybe a early Rob Halford or something like that. And it's called power metal. It doesn't sound like what we know power metal to be today. It still sounds... This album's kind of on an island compared to what they did on the next album and what they did previously. But I would have to say it's probably closer. It's still being produced by their dad. I would have to say that it's still a little closer to the Glamterra stuff of the Terry Glaze era than it is to what they're going to do in 2 years when they get on a major label. It's still definitely closer to that. But this is my favorite of the 4 they did in the 80s. It's showing just little hints and signs. It's certainly getting heavier. Production's getting better. Dime and Vinny are just excelling at their instruments. And it is interesting to hear Phil as a true as a true singer, and he's not really doing any of his trademark sounds that he would do on the next 5 albums. But still a cool listen. They do re-record Down Below, which was on I Am the Night, so they re-record one song from I Am the Night on here. I mean, it's, they do Proud to Be Loud, which every time you think they're going to step it up, they do a ballad with little keyboards. Like, why did they do that? But then they give you the heaviest song ever at this point, Over and Out and Death Trap. So they're giving you some thrash. But then they do Proud to Be Loud. Somebody mentioned it sounded like an Accept song or something like that. So this band is still trying to figure out what its identity is going to be. It's still kind of searching or following what might be going on at the time. Still getting heavier. So there you go. At number 6, I've got from '88 their final album on not on a major label. Their final album not in the '80s. Their final Glamterra era album. I do have Power Metal. So that's a brief history of those first 4 albums for anyone that doesn't know, and I'm sure a lot of people already are aware of all this stuff. But so they did have that phase in their career for sure. But moving forward, on to the stuff that probably everybody knows and the stuff that I have physical copies of. And coming in at number 5, it's tough to put this in 5 because these top albums are all excellent. But I'm just going to put it at number 5 for today. Their final album from 2000, I have Reinventing the Steel. I dig this album. It's the only one on the major label that wasn't produced by Terry Date. Although he has since remixed this album for a re-release in 2020. There's nothing wrong about this album. It comes out 4 years after the previous album. I think the band was kind of maybe at a tough time. I don't know if the band was not getting along maybe with the singer or what was going on, or I know that in the late 90s kind of extreme metal and metal in general kind of was going through a dark time, so maybe they were just waiting out the storm before they released this. But these songs are... Hellbound comes out thrashing. Here's Goddamn Electric, right on cue from this album. Yesterday Don't Mean Shit. Revolution Is My Name, Death Rattle, you know, Outcast the Shadow. There's nothing, everything on here is good. I think maybe I don't have as much of a connection with it as the earlier ones, or it's not maybe as critical or, you know, critical to their career as some of the earlier albums, but that doesn't diminish it at all. And if you're younger than me and got into the band at a different time, this might be your favorite album. I got into the band at a certain point, so this album maybe connects with me slightly less, and maybe it's the album cover. It's notorious for being one of the all-time worst album covers, but there's nothing wrong with the music on here. And considering there was a 4-year gap between albums and Terry Dates not producing, it sounds exactly like you'd expect Pantera to sound. So kudos to them for not altering their sound very much and just keeping it heavy. You know, just keeping it as real as possible. But yeah, so there you go. You know, unfortunately, this was their final album, their first in 4 years, and then they didn't put out a follow-up. So again, I'm not sure what was going on with the band or with Phil in particular, but again, I don't think there's a weak track on this, and there are plenty of awesome tracks, especially this one. I don't know if this is it might be sonically their heaviest. It's one of their heaviest albums, for sure. My buddy Eric has this ranked number 3. He's younger than me, so I bet the younger crew probably digs this album even more. But there you go. At number 5, their final album for 2000, Reinventing the Steel. Okay, coming in at number 4, and I wanted to rank this number 3. It feels like a 3, because I'm a big fan of this album. At number 4, their 8th album from 1996. The Great Southern Trendkill. In classic Pantera form, the title track, the opening track comes out thrashing. War Nerve is heavy and aggressive. Drag the Waters is their groovy mid-paced one. There's some cowbell. And that Tens is cool. You know, Phil sings a little bit on this one. You know, he used to sing early in his career, and then he kind of stopped doing like pure singing, but he does some cool, soulful, you know, down and dirty, some soulful singing on that one. 13 Steps to Nowhere is different, so you get a nice variety on the first half, and then they keep the variety going on the second half of this. So Suicide Note Part 1, I'm not a fan of, but I think it's cool that they tried like almost a ballad, like a Texas ballad, and Phil sings on that for sure. But it's such a juxtaposition to Suicide Note Part 2, which is possibly their most brutal song to date. I mean, it's their fastest, thrashiest, most aggressive song I do believe that they've ever done. And I love that song. Living Through Me is cool. It goes all over the place. It sounds like something they would have done on an album 2 before this from 92, but it's good. And then we heard Floods earlier. Floods to me is awesome in that there's no other song that they've done that sounds like Floods. It's like it's like Pantera being experimental and progressive, if that even makes sense. If they ever did something progressive, Floods would be it. It's got a weird clean channel tone. It breaks down. It's got a weird snare hit. It's got thunder in there. It's got a strange outro. So it's just a very strange song, but I really dig it. And then it just kind of wraps up with The Underground in America and Sandblasted Skin. So I think the first side is awesome. I think Suicide Note Part 2, Living Through Me, and Floods are great. Suicide Note Part 1 I don't have a problem with. It's not my cup of tea, but I think it's cool they tried that. And then it kind of ends with 2 songs. I don't know. So if I'm trying to justify why it's coming in at number 4, I guess that's it. But really, it's an awesome album. It's my favorite album cover there with that rattlesnake. So nothing but good things to say about the Great Southern Trendkill. I saw them on the, I guess it was off of this album cycle, I saw them on the Ozfest tour, so I'm glad I got to see them. And I think I even saw, I think it was Pantera with White Zombie and the Deftones in 96, I want to believe. And then I saw them in 97, I believe, for the Ozfest. So I saw them in back-to-back years, promoting this album in particular. Glad I did. But there you go. At number 4, their 8th album from '96, The Great Southern Touring Kill. Good timing on this song. So coming in at number 3, not their debut, their 5th album from 1990, I've got Cowboys from Hell. For the longest time, I just assumed this was their debut album. This is their 5th of 9 albums. It's their first one on a major label. It's their first one being produced by Terry Date, and it's their first one with this new sound. So whatever you heard on the first 4 albums is irrelevant at this point. They've completely reinvented themselves. I mean, down to Phil's vocal approach, the guitar approach, everything. The style, this is, you're purely entrenched in thrash in 1990, and they're doing it in a new way too. And that would especially happen on the next album. But right here, they found this new sound. They may sound a little bit like Metallica or somebody like that in spots, but they've got this new groove right there. That, you know, Dime and Vinny. You know, you've got Dimebag on guitars, so right there you're super original and ahead of the pack. Nobody heard a singer like Phil Anselmo at this point, and they certainly have their own sense of rhythm and groove. And the thing I like about this album, I put it number 3. You can make an argument that the 2 albums I ranked behind this may be better in ways, more mature, heavier for sure, better production. But the thing I do like about this album is it's exciting, and it has a variety. I mean, this song's got a great groove. Primal Concrete Sledge is strange and kind of experimental. You're not hear another rhythm like that. Psycho Holiday's cool. Heresy's awesome. Cemetery Gates is clean channel Dimebag. It's singing from Phil, like real singing from Phil. Domination is different. Lots of double bass. Shattered Clash with Reality. Medicine Man's got a cool thing. So there's just this huge variety of metal styles on this album that after this they pretty much found their sound and stuck to it for the album. But on here it's like the Pantera Variety Hour. And Phil's still singing. He's not quite as gruff as he will be. So this is their sound. It's not totally dialed in yet, but it's just cool to hear them at the beginning stages of this new thing right here. And again, that's probably its most enduring quality is that it's kind of their first one. Everybody loves Cowboys from Hell, but it's just got that awesome variety. So if you want to hear lots of melody and a little bit of Phil singing and show him what he can do as an actual vocalist, and, you know, beyond just being a thrash vocalist, this is the album. And like I said, you know, it may kind of quiet down on the last 3 tracks or so, or not quiet down, but, you know, maybe this is a track or two too long, but that's okay. It's a long album, it's like 57 minutes, but 12 songs, I can let it play from 1 to 9, and I'm enjoying all of those songs. So, and just crucial to their career, I think this went platinum. I mean, this was a big deal when it came out. This is when I think this is when a lot of people found out who they were. So, there you go. Coming in at number 3, their 5th album, not their first album, but their 5th album from 1990, Cowboys from Hell. Okay, my top 2, you probably can figure out what the top 2 are going to be, but I flipped this at the last day. But at number 2, I guess I'm going to go with from 1994, Far Beyond Driven, 1994, Far Beyond Driven at number 2. This is them at the height of their powers. I mean, this is them just, they completely got their sound dialed in at this point. Strength Beyond Strength comes out, just ripping and thrashing and stomping. But look at all these signature songs from them. Becoming, 5 Minutes Alone, I'm Broken. I mean, those are 3 of their most famous songs of all time. We heard Slaughtered earlier, one of their meanest songs, 25 Years, Shedding Skin. So this album is just great. I was trying to figure out why is this not their number 1 album, because it feels like a number 1 album. And I think the reason the other album won the tiebreaker is I think they've got a song called here, Good Friends and a Bottle of Pills. I don't know what to do with that. It's just kind of there. They do a cover of Planet Caravan, which I think is cool, but I don't ever listen to that version of it. If I want to hear that song, I'll just hear Sabbath do it. But it's cool that they did something, and that's also the only time Phil really even truly sings on this album. Everything he does on here is pretty beat, which is cool. And also, you know, Hardline, Sunken Cheeks at 7 minutes. It's got some cool riffs, but I don't know if it really needed to be 7 minutes long. And then towards the end, you know, Use My Third Arm, Throes of Rejection. They're okay songs, but they're not great songs. But that said, this is a classic, awesome album, and nothing on here is bad. And 3 of their biggest songs are right there, 2, 3, 4. Becoming, 5 Minutes Alone, and I'm Broken. I mean, right there. So killer album coming in at number 2. I think everybody's pretty familiar with this album. And this is probably, if I had to guess, I would say most people would say this is their number 1. And it was my number 1 at times during this, you know, preparing for this episode. But yeah, Becoming, 5 Minutes Alone, I'm Broken. My favorite, Slaughtered in 25 years. Shedding Skin, all those songs are awesome. So this is their 3rd album of the 5 with this new sound of theirs. And at this point, if it wasn't already dialed in, it's just completely perfected here. Or, you know, they're completely at the top of their game right here. Far beyond driven. So there can only be one. And so coming in at number 1, I don't know. They're out from 1992. The second with this new sound, I'm going with Vulgar Display of Power. So it comes out in 92. At this point, for me personally, I'm listening to pretty much nothing but death metal. But there were 2 albums in 92 that came out that had guitar players that really, like, I always paid attention to. Pantera with Dimebag and his guitar playing blew me away, and Dream Theater with John Petrucci. So I was like entrenched in death metal, but I was listening to Dimebag and Petrucci, and just fascinated by what they were coming up with and what Dime was coming up with on his guitar style on this album. And this is where they pretty much dial in their sound. Everything that was awesome on Cowboys, they've honed in, and they've kind of shed some of the other things on Cowboys from Hell. So you start with Mouth for War, very aggressive opening track, as they always do. A New Level, which we heard to open the show, which is great. Walk, everybody knows Walk. Fucking Hostile, their thrashy one on here. This Love is cool. It's kind of, I don't want to compare it to Cemetery Gates, but it's got the clean channel, and Phil's actually singing, but then it gets heavy. And then Rise is a thrashy one. And I used to have it on cassette at the beginning. Then you flip the side 2. No Good, Attack the Radical. Awesome song. I think we heard that earlier. Just love Dime's guitar playing all over that. His riffs on here are awesome. So melodic yet so heavy and thrashy. I just like the mixture of their grooving thrash and all the cool riffing. You know, Live in a Hole. Regular People's awesome. Again, another catchy, groovy one. By Demons Be Driven's awesome. I mean, the guitar riff on that one, so it's heavy, and then Dime's guitar over the verse riff. But then you finish it with a song called Hollow, which I think is just an awesome way to end the album. It's a chance for Phil to show off his vocal abilities at this point in his career, and it's just another chance for Dime to show off his guitar playing, and it's got atmosphere coming from Dime's guitar and all the delays and effects and stuff. So I've always loved that song, and it gets heavy by the end. So to me, everything on here is awesome. And so for me, this is the most complete album. I think Cowboys has a ton of tracks I like. I think Far Beyond Driven has a ton of awesome tracks. I think Southern Tranquil and Remain the Steel have a ton of tracks, but this is the one that probably connects it. It's the best from beginning to end. And it's just, I think I heard this at a time where I was already excited about Cowboys from Hell, and then this comes out and you're like, whoa, they just upped it with that. And obviously they just fortified themselves with Far Beyond Driven. But those first 3 Pantera albums on the major label were just, that was it. That's their legacy, and they obviously added to it with Southern Tranquil and Reinventing. But I just think this is it right here. 11 tracks. What's the tagline? All killer, no filler. But just, you know, and at this point, Phil has shaved his head, so he's got that dangerous look going on. And they're just showing bands how you can do heavy music in the 90s now. I think up until this point, everything was kind of like 80s based, and then, you know, Metallica was doing their thing, but I just think this just showed all these, you know, I hate to bring in the word new metal, but all these groove and new metal bands probably were most influenced by Pantera at this point. So, but there you go. Coming in at number 1, Vulgar Display of Power. So quickly to go through the rankings again. At number 9, you've got Metal Magic. At number 8, you've got I Am the Night. At number 7, you've got Project in the Jungle. At number 6, their final one of the Glamtera era, you got Power Metal. And then at number 5, you've got their final album from 2000, Reinventing the Steel. At number 4, you've got The Great Southern Trendkill. Number 3, Cowboys from Hell. Number 2, Far Beyond Driven. And number 1, Vulgar Display of Power. So there you go. That is ranking all 9 albums of Pantera. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.